I get asked why Steph Curry and Trae Young wear this specific brace a lot, but people ask me even more if they should be wearing it too. So let's find out. Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I'm going to break down what's become almost its own character in the NBA, especially in terms of performance, kind of shoes and footwear, and that is the Zamst A2-DX. And thanks to Zamst for sending me one of these over to sponsor this video. However, like always, all opinions are still my own, likes, dislikes, and everything in between. So let's get into it. Now, to understand why two NBA superstars wear this brace, you kind of have to understand why anybody would use any brace at all on a basketball court, tennis court, pickleball court, whatever. And now there are a plethora of reasons, as you can see on screen right now, but the most common reason is ankle spraining. But ankle sprains are, they're not a monolith. There are really a ton of variations to them. There's a grade 1, 2, and 3, which means either stretched, partially torn, or completely torn. There's also about 8-ish ligaments on the outside of your ankle that you can sprain. ATFL, which is the most common, the CFL, PTFL, which are the two on the outside of your ankle. And then there's the inferior tib-fib ligaments, the syndesmosis, and the superior tib-fib ligaments, which can all be involved in a high ankle sprain. That's why when you hear a high ankle sprain, a lot of times you have no idea which ligament they actually injured. And a grade 1, 2, or 3 can happen to any or all of these structures, which begs the question sometimes, how does anybody avoid an ankle sprain in the NBA? However, in Steph Curry's case, he's completely torn multiple ankle ligaments over the course of years, multiple times. And as a lot of you know, ligaments don't heal like tendons or bones. Their scars are disorganized and they're weak. So if you have a grade 1 or 2, you have a much better chance of completely rehabbing it versus a complete tear where that scar can just be, completely unreliable. Plus, when you damage a ligament, you're also damaging the neural connection back to your brain, which is responsible for your brain knowing where your feet are in space and knowing where you're at any given time. So the more damage you do to that connection, the more unstable you're going to become. And when you're Steph Curry and have had a grade 3 ligament injury, there's really two options, surgery or a brace. The problem with surgery is that the scarring from the surgery can be brutal and the stiffness can be worse than wearing a stiff brace. And in Steph Curry's case, where you've had multiple injuries to multiple ligaments over multiple years, that can get to be a lot of cutting. Cue in the Zamst A2-DX. Now this brace specifically, unlike others, has rigid plastic here on the medial and lateral sides, which acts as a container versus, softer braces, which, although they provide support and biofeedback, they're not gonna replace a lost ligament. And the nice things about the A2-DX for Steph Curry specifically, and Trae Young, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that number one, it does provide some compression with the sleeve underneath of it, but then it also has these elastic straps that go from the bottom of your foot, so your arch, that come up all the way over top of your ligaments. So they're also giving compression and biofeedback to more like the ATFL and CFL, but also your medial ligaments. So if you have had a deltoid ligament injury or maybe some posterior tibial tendonitis, more arch strain, it'll also help that, because a lot of times people with arch issues sometimes also have ligament sprains. The other nice thing is what people really take for granted is the strap on the very top of the brace, which pushes these two plastic stirrups together. And what that does is that helps with those high ankle sprains. Because remember, those high ankle ligaments and that syndesmosis, which is that big piece of celery between your two leg bones, when that's injured and that scar is a little bit disorganized, that can also be very painful if it's not supported. So this really adds a lot of compression and just almost like a secondary guard against that big piece of celery in between your leg moving and toggling. The nice thing is these stirrups start about 1/3 of the way up the brace. So you're still getting all the motion in your subtalar joint and your talonavicular joint, which is really the ones responsible for a lot of that shifty movement. You don't want to be using your ankles to get really shifty on somebody. That's when you sprain. You want to be using the joints that are supposed to do that, like your subtalar and talonavicular joint. And in a lot of braces where the rigid component comes all the way down to the floor, it restricts a lot of that motion as well. And that's where you start to see people get really stiff legs, stiff ankles they call them, but it's really just a stiff foot. Whereas in the Zamst, you're still allowed all of that motion in your foot, which is all of that really kind of natural basketball motion. But in the ankle joint, where you really only want dorsiflexion and plantar flexion up and down, that's where you get the rigid stirrup, and that's where you get all the protection. It's really a perfect marriage of rigid support up top and then more biofeedback down below. And that's a perfect segue as to why Trae Young wears this brace too, even with shoes that he's had in the past like the Trae 1 and Trae 2, which were real elastic slipper tongue shoes which allow all this freedom of movement in your rear foot. And it's because this brace also allows that freedom of movement in your foot, just not your ankle. So really with this brace, it's allowing him to use the tools of those shoes better in the joints that you're supposed to use them with, not trying to get all that motion in your ankle. Whereas this brace kind of basically tells your leg, you know, don't use this part, use this, and that makes those shoes that much more effective for someone like him who can get so shifty on the court. And the one thing I forgot to mention when I was going over the brace is that these things are a lot easier to fit when your leg is a little bit swollen or ankle is swollen, because the base layer of these just have a little bit of elastic to them and they are Velcroed in multiple spots. If your leg is swollen and then starts to come down from swelling, you can still get that nice compression from them. So even if your leg is maybe different sizes at different times, this brace is still gonna fit and get more of a customized fit versus some others where it's just small, medium, and large, and that's really the only size, and you're really only getting the compression from the actual straps, whereas these, it's the stirrups that's doing it, as well as the actual booty liner of it, which provides another layer of compression as well as kind of customization to your leg. So the biggest question is, with all of that support, you know, should you be using this too? Well, for a grade 1 and 2, recovering with a more forgiving brace, you know, like the A1 or the Filmista, can be beneficial because it allows your ligaments to go through a period of, you know, protected healing while also, you know, providing support and stability, whereas a rigid brace, you know, for sure can provide stability for those injuries, but it is better suited to situations where you're actually relying on the brace for all the stability, like a full tear, versus in grade 1s and 2s, where, you know, with rehab and protected healing, your body can really recover that protective element. And for athletes with multiple grade 1s and 2s, or, you know, or the chronic spraining we talk about, it is really dealer's choice. Some do well with just compression or, you know, semi-constraining devices, and some do better with, you know, really rigid devices like the A2-DX. It's like the security of hard plastic. And two completely different people with the exact same injury might really prefer one over the other, or just be able to play much better or heal faster with one versus the other. That's why in Steph Curry's case, the rigidity, because if you have had multiple injuries, that is multiple times you are just severing the connection between your brain and your ankle. And over time, it just becomes that you need that, even just that little bit of extra piece that, you know, just can rub on your skin every time you're making a move that just tells your brain where your leg is in space. I think in Steph Curry's case at this point, he's using them, number one, half for the rigid support for sure, but the other half is just because his brain needs more biofeedback, and these just give the ultimate amount of biofeedback, especially because it is a combination of rigid plus elastic or, you know, more flexible elements. That's why it's so important to nail down a diagnosis with your doctor. But of course, love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I know different types of braces and, you know, just kind of the science of braces can be a hot topic, especially in the communities of, you know, physical therapy, podiatry, orthopedic surgery, that kind of stuff. So I'd love to know if you're using one down in the comments below, if you know, kind of rehab through them, if you continue to use them, or if you've been someone that has gone through the surgery route, let me know in the comments down below. And I will have links to all these Zamst braces in the comments down below. And in the future, I might do a video breaking down the other two Zamst braces in their line, the A1 and the Filmista as well, kind of more of a deep dive like we did on the A2-DX. So if you want to see that, make sure you leave me a comment down below. And if you want to see another video about Steph Curry and kind of the shoe choices he has made, kind of some of his deeper runs in the playoffs, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam, and in this case, plastic. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.